Welcome back, everybody, to Key Time Sports. Got a lot of stuff to get into. The Boston Celtics and the Indiana Pacers last night, plus the Western Conference Finals tips off tonight between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks. But first off, I want to get into the Eastern Conference Finals from what we saw last night. Now, what we saw last night, we saw the Boston Celtics get out to a 15-point lead in the first quarter. But from what I was seeing on throughout the game after those first 5, 6 minutes in the first quarter, it was just basically the Boston Celtics and Indiana Pacers were just trading baskets for most of the game until the last few minutes where it seems like defensive intensity rose to the occasion. Now, as far as the Indiana Pacers, everybody had a good game. Tyrese Halliburton had 25 points. Pascal Siakam had 24 points. Miles Turner had 23 points. And then they got contributions from the bench. Andrew Nabar, 12 points. TJ McConnell, 13 points. OG Toppin, 15 points. So they got contributions from the bench. But where they lost the game in the last 30 seconds. And that is why I said last night that Jaylen Brown's three-pointer basically won them the game, because the Pacers, they should have won this in regulation. You are up by 3 with under 10 seconds left. What Rick Carlisle, he blamed himself in the press conference, and he was supposed to do that because you got the ball under 10 seconds left. You got a timeout. Call a timeout. Advance the ball up into the front court. That way, Tyrese Halliburton can just inbound the ball, and then one of the Pacers players get fouled, go to the free throw line, and end the game right there. But that last inbound play for the Indiana Pacers before overtime was all discombobulated. You had Pascal Siakam, Derek White, Jason Tatum on Tyrese Halliburton, and basically the last shot, that was a bad setup, bad play. What Tyrese Halliburton should have did was, even if now Boston, they wasn't gonna let him drive to the hole. They wasn't gonna let him do that and get in the paint. So what he should have did was created enough space. But credit to Jason Tatum, like Tyrese Halliburton was like right here and Jason Tatum was like right on him. So that was a good matchup. Basically, when it comes to the Indiana Pacers, they had game one won. Now everybody was saying they had to at least get one game in Boston. I believe they missed out on a chance last night because the Celtics, coming down the stretch, they took some ill-advised threes when they should have went to the paint. I'm going to tell you how many threes they took last night. They took 45 threes last night and only made 15 for a percentage total of 33%. Now, like I've been saying, when the threes aren't going, when the threes aren't going in, the Boston Celtics need to pack it into the paint. Now, last night, points in the paint, the Boston Celtics, they had it in their favor. They had 60 points in the paint, and the Pacers had 58 points in the paint. So, defensively, both of these teams are about average. Excuse me. Now, you cannot depend on defense in this series. Basically, both of these teams had the same amount of shots last night. It's about what team makes the most shots, because defensively, you can just throw it out the window. You can throw defense out the window with this series, because it is going to come down who can make the most shots. Now, as far as the three-point shots, the Boston Celtics made more threes than the Indiana Pacers last night, 15-13. free throw disparity. Now, the free throw disparity, I was keyed in on that. You got the Boston Celtics taking 30 free throws, and you only have the Pacers taking 10 free throws. So the free throw disparity was I had a little skepticism with the free throw disparity. Now, as far as total rebounds, it was dead even at 43. Offensive rebounds, the Boston Celtics out-rebounded the Pacers by 3, 12-9. Defensive rebounds, the Pacers out-rebounded the Celtics by 3, 34-31. Now, when it comes to turnovers, and that is ultimately where the Indiana Pacers lost this game. Now, Tyrese Halliburton, he only had 3 turnovers, but they proved costly. He had 2 turnovers coming down the stretch in the last 30 seconds of the fourth quarter, and he had 1 critical turnover in overtime. So now, that's all I got for the Pacers. As far as the Celtics concerned, now the Celtics, they did what they were supposed to do. Win game 1 on their home floor. I heard Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum at the end of the game said that we did not play our best. We were fortunate enough to win. So that tells me that game 2, they are going to come out even better. But one guy I got to give my flowers to and got to give him credit is one of the X factors I said that was going to be critical in this series. Drew Holiday had 28 points and 8 assists and 8 rebounds last night, and it proved critical because Drew Holiday was defending Tyrese Halliburton the last 3 minutes of the game, the last 3 minutes of overtime, and the last 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, Tyrese Halliburton was being defended by Drew Holiday, and the last 2 minutes of overtime, Drew Holiday was defending Tyrese Halliburton on an elite level. He was defending without fouling. Not to mention, Jason Tatum had 36 points and 12 rebounds, a double-double. Jaylen Brown had 26 points and 7 rebounds. Al Horford had 15 points and 6 rebounds. So everybody in the starting lineup pitched in and scored at least 15 points, if not more. Derek White also scored 15 points. He had a couple of critical threes down the stretch that they needed. If those don't go in, I'm obviously talking about a different kind of outcome in the Pacers' favor. But as of right now, even Peyton Pritchard came off the bench and had 8 points. So now, as far as the Celtics, there's a question that has been looming after the game. Did the Pacers lose this game, or did the Celtics win this game? I'm going to go along with the Pacers lost this game because you had the game won. You're up by 3 with under 10 seconds left. I'm going to go back to what I was saying earlier. Rick Carlisle said that he cost his team the game, and he did. You got 1 timeout left, advance the ball in the front court, let Halliburton inbound the ball or TJ McConnell inbound the ball, put it in your best free throw shooter's hands, and you end the game like that. So now game 2 is tomorrow, Thursday night. How will the Indiana Pacers bounce back from last night's game 1 loss and win game 2? That's if they can win game 2. Losing a game like this, the way they lost last night, is deflating because with under 10 seconds left, the Boston Celtics only had a 1.5% chance of winning, and that was with the Pacers being up 3 points. So the Boston Celtics got lucky last night, and the Indiana Pacers, they choked that game away. They let it slip away. They lost their grip. Instead of it being 1-0 Indiana, it's 1-0 Boston. So that's all I got as far as game one of the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, as far as the Western Conference Finals, and everybody has been waiting for this to happen. You got the Dallas Mavericks, and then you got the Minnesota Timberwolves. You got Anthony Edwards, Ant-Man, Karl Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert. And as far as for the Dallas Mavericks, you got Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving. I know what I'm going to get from both of those players on both sides of the floor. But what I want to talk about is the X factors for this series on both sides, on both teams. Now, I'm going to tell you, last series for the Dallas Mavericks, and these two players are going to be X factors for this series too. Derek Levy II, PJ Washington, and also Tim Hardaway Jr. Tim Hardaway Jr., he is going to have to come up in this series. He cannot score 5-10 points a game in this series. He is going to have to average at least 15 to about 20 points in this series. Also, PJ Washington will also have to average at least 15 to 20 points in this game. Now, Derek Levy II, he is going to have to average at least 10 to about 12 rebounds. And those are the three X factors that I have for this series. Also, another X factor, and I'm going to put a double X factor on this, because the Dallas Mavericks, they will need this guy to come through in key situations. Derrick Jones Jr., a good average for him in this series is 12 to 15 points, because he's only averaged 15 minutes. He only averaged 15 minutes in the last series against Oklahoma. So that's who I have as my X factors for the Dallas Mavericks. Now, as far as for Kyrie Irving, I am not concerned about Kyrie Irving and how he was playing in the last series. He was a facilitator, but in this series, he is going to have to attack as well as Luka Doncic. He is going to have to be on the attack, and then he is going to have to pick and choose those moments to get Tim Hardaway Jr., Derek Levy, also Derrick Jones Jr. involved in the game, because it's basically going to be a two-man show for basically this series on both sides. On both sides, you're going to have a two-man show for the Dallas Mavericks, and I already gave you all of my X factors for the game, for the series. Now I'm going to get to the Minnesota Timberwolves players and X factors for this series. We all know what we're going to get from Anthony Edwards, Ant-Man. We already know what we're going to get from Karl Anthony Towns. It's just Karl Anthony Towns. He has got to be a little bit more consistent throughout this series, because it's the Western Conference Finals. Both of these teams, they have the same agenda, the same scheme, everything. They are the spitting image of each other. But basically, when it comes to the X factors for the Minnesota Timberwolves, I got 2 X factors, maybe 3. I'm looking at Mike Conley Jr. He gonna have to average about 10 or 15 in this series. Also, Jaden McDaniels, 15 to 20. Naz Reid, about 10 to 12 points a game. And also another X factor, Jalen Clark, Kyle Anderson. Now, Kyle Anderson, he hasn't played many minutes throughout the season, even many minutes throughout the playoffs. But when it comes to the Western Conference Finals, anybody who is able to suit up and get out there on the floor, they have to be at least a scorer, or they don't have to be a scorer, but at least they have to at least slow Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic down, and all the other Maverick players down. That's what they have to do. Now, as far as who I got winning this series, I'm going to pick the Minnesota Timberwolves to win this series in 6 games, maybe even 7. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the Minnesota Timberwolves in 6 because Anthony Edwards is on a tear. And when you get those bench players from the Minnesota Timberwolves playing the way that they have been playing, and also defensively, the Minnesota Timberwolves are the best defense in the NBA. So they hang their hat on the defensive side, and they got 4 players that could go find their shot. With the Dallas Mavericks, you only got 2 players, obviously, which is Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Everybody else has to find their shot off of Luka Doncic or Kyrie Irving. And with the Minnesota Timberwolves, you got 4 players, possibly 5, who can go and find their own shot. At the end of the day, I got to go with the Timberwolves to win this series in 6 games. Now, game 1 tips off tonight, 8:30 Eastern Time, and it will be a great one. And with that, those are my reactions from the Eastern Conference Finals Game 1 and the Western Conference outlook for the series between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, click the notification bell to get notified of all of my reaction videos and content and shows and other content. And with that, the last thing I always say, remember, the key is always on time.